images of like white people that were cut into this flame pattern and recomposited, and the hair is the smoke. So you have these South Sea Islanders looking up, and El Greco, we added his knees, because these images are always, so compromised. They're so small, so everything has to come and be
Built it up.
and it has to be cut, very carefully. Some are based on surrealism, obviously the origins, like Max Ernst and Hannah Hoke, all the tradition of collage. This is like, in this one, this is about incarceration, and you find an image of a woman, and each one has a narrative. They're all named. You like the names. I have a book of every name. There's 506, and I named them all.
Where's the book?
It's to check. I'll bring it to you. I'll look around. I'll bring the copy.
Is this the first time these are shown?
Yes, in this entirety. Some were shown before Victoria, but like I said, this is the unabridged set.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just last night.
It's so beautiful too. So look at the room. It's like the whole way it's laid out.
There's one, that one there. Wood off the woods, of the branches and stuff.
These are all the original. No, there's a rule. No reproduction.
But how do you get so many woods?
From all the pages, they have images of trees, and we cut. Here's the title page.
But it's only from one edition of encyclopedia.
One set, and given.
It had a lot of parameters, a lot of rules.
Yeah, and the rules is, there are some escapage of sometimes a cutter would, I call them cutters and gluers, which is one person, two people. But sometimes they lay something down from one volume, and sometimes there's a few what I call authorized hybrids. But very
Authorized by you.
Yeah, I said, you can't improve it. But by and large, anyone that was hybridized, I would destroy and start again, because I had to be honorable to say no reproduction, and you can't flip the side, you can't reproduce it. Everything was set. This is like the last one I did was it's called the Mace of Authority. It's about writing. So it's got, there's no image of women, of writers, of all the men, so that's Virginia Woolf, right? But if you look at, so I did a Geisen Burroughs lines of poetry for this. So it's a special one for that. No, it's not good. I mean, you're restricted by what you got in the book, So
Is there going to be like a publication of all these?
We photographed everyone. We hope someday that there's an Ashford Museum, as this was just showing you, maybe there will be a monograph.
Poems off of them.
Yeah.
These are the titles of poems. There'll be a whole series of poems. How many are there? 500?
506, yeah.
So 506 poems.
Well,
The title's already there, the image.
Yes, image, and there's some narrative.
That's our collaboration class.
So you work off that, or whatever. But I enjoy.
So can we get you to agree to it right now on camera?
What are we talking about? Did I say something, Mr. Yates? Yeah, whatever you say. I mean, it's all, So it's been fun. It's been
Wow, they're really gorgeous.
Yeah, thank you. So each one has its own little
Story to it.
Yeah, this is about.
Is the story written out, or is it all just in your head, the story?
It's all in my head, but could you research? This is like about Toussaint Overture. The Overture, the founder of Haiti, right? The first rebel, 1802, died in prison. But this also had this thing on tobacco and pipes, and it's almost like his dream. It's not a pipe dream, but it escapes the prison to this day. So it's moving around. This is Toscanini, who had his telephone bugged. So this is his orchestra. And, you have. So everything, and this is like technology and the longing of communication. This is woven. This is a woven weapon. It's the tapestry. He's using himself. He's using to kill himself. This is like the cycle pheromone kind of attraction. But these are all wigs cut from the people. And these are things that don't see the heads that don't see the sun because of the wig. So they're sea creatures. And this are hair are bald head people see the sun, so that's the sun, and these are photosynthetic, affected things here. And there's military commentary. Well, this one is Baudelaire, the spleen, Baudelaire's table. So
Is that really his table?
No, there's a French, but that's a spleen, and So So, you know, what they say. So,
How did you do this with the, like, you had all the images from each volume cut up, and then you sort of started?
Yeah. Then it becomes like a composition has to be occur, and they'll be all laid out. And I come in cold.
All the images are laid out.
Yeah, I had the team. You know, I cut, everybody
Yeah,
cuts,
yeah.
and you lay them all out, and that's okay. Volume, 23 is ready. So I would come in and begin the composition, and I would work until and then says, now put this out. You glue that one. You glue that one. Then we hand glue. It's painstakingly cut. Sometimes they're cut not even going to be used, but you don't know. So they become the graphical alphabet to recompose this. And the idea is to take something that.
But each one had to have a story, though. Each one had to have some logic or something. Or...
sometimes the story comes about because of the image.
Yeah.
And also I know something like, wow, that I have to do this about this, or it's funny. Some things occur naturally. Of course, not in the same boat. Sheep, with weapons, or also freeing. It's called off the menu. But this is about just like brain chemistry and psychology. It's a split brain. But there's none of these have anything to do with it. But this starts with this image of a person thinking, and then the cave, the resetting it and slicing. I do splicing and put it within the woods, and then this is his thought. This is 33 men and 4 women. So but what it is these books in the 50s. I kept saying, why, there's no equality, right? And so I just slapped them all together to create a thickness, and that shows you what the mindset. So this is
Bernard Shaw.
Yeah. So you have these commentaries, of course, are upgraded for current political or social kind of dynamics. Like this one, there were never empty threats, and you see that's from Afghanistan. So it's a family. So she wear a burqa then, but it's like crosshairs.
Wow.
It's our attack. And then I use the planes up there, for another one, And so each one, of course, Columbus and someone coming out. And of course, these are images that had to be, and the cutting was very important, The one thing that's an aberration that this cut is the Western Sahara piece with the bridge. That's not a tear line that is not without meaning. That tear line matches a 2,700 kilometer berm that divides the Western Sahara with more landmines than any place on the planet. And it is divided the people from the sea. That's our rightful.
The Western Sahara.
The Western Sahara is one of the conflict zones that no one talks about. Yeah. Probably the origins of Arab Spring, because before Tunisia, they had the Camp of Dignity that was attacked by the Moroccans and destroyed. People were killed, and no one. They've been living in refugee camps for 36 years in Algeria. I went to the refugee camps. I was with them, and recently, and so I was thinking about them, and so that becomes that piece, So they're weird, and also doing collage rather than. It becomes a method of opening up, other sides of my creativity, so to speak, in psychology. You see my humor or weirdness or whatever, I don't know, because you don't have, but you're only, again, restricted by the palette, Sometimes there's text things, this is yes and no, like Y-E-S and no, And some things happen, they're strange. But and they're not hung. They're hung so they can be formal, be read like a book. So they're meant to be read, in their own way. This is an interesting one here. This is it's not like compositionally too cool, but what it is, it's actually called a collage artist.
And that was one of the few that has like the text.
Well, when you look at it, it's actually things that I was getting ready to toss. But I found this guy who had a stick in his hand, but I made him cut a collage. So it's a collage, and this is all brought all cameras on him and all this, and they're looking, and it's going, and you see this cutout, right? And this is the piece I put together that I didn't put into a collage, right? And so it's go, but here she is, in another piece. This says diamonds are a girl's best fiend, and this is all minerals, right? And becoming this, and there's the figure holding in. She's involved in some kind of strange behavior with a diamond, And that's a molecule, I think, of graphite, so it's carbon, you know, so. So it has to be, for me, they have to make this kind of sense, you know. This is like, this is the one that's kind of psychosexual, because you're adult, you can handle it. But it's weird, it's about reflection, you know, it just worked.
Ronnie's very sensitive.
Okay, well, you know, you bought it back off, but this is about ego and male prowess and her own narcissism, you know, there. So I love that.
I think I get it.
Yeah, you got it. But this is like the owl of architecture. You know, you have a beautiful image of an owl. What are you gonna do with it? You know, it has its own aura. So instead, I added all this. But I think this is that it had no appetite for island architecture. So you have this guinea fowl in this situation. So there's Martha Graham again, by the way. We don't disrespect her. We just, dancing on the hands, on the hands of goddesses and goddesses.
Martha Graham made it into the, what year is this?
1950, 53 to 56. I think that's the universal standard. Yeah.
Yeah, 53 to 56.
And I was doing it because it was like my parents. I was born around 51, so it was like my formative years. So it was a meditation.
Yeah.
But to upgrade it to now,
Yeah.
the weird.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of comments in ecology and beheadings or whatever. So, it's different.
Yeah, a lot of heads up there.
Yeah, because you got to deal with what you got. This is Aldous Huxley, by the way, and this is his Doors of Perception.
Which one? That
This-
one right
this
there.
Huxley,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
it's-
yeah.
It's going, and the crystal is cracking the.
So say again, what this is a derivative from, because the camera wasn't on earlier.
This is all from the Funk and Wagnall's Universal Standard Encyclopedia that was active from 1953 to like 58, I believe, 59. Then they switched to another standard, but.
And you found these in your parents' house?
I started with one, and I was compelled to do the entire set.
It's a lot of work.
Oh, so did you have to find the sets from the rest from
Yeah,
somewhere else?
when I found the set, but that's the set, everything comes out of that on that, and all the scraps are.
Haiku.
So you've cut every image out of every one of these books?
And they become the palette, they become the colors for this, for all these. So one volume equates with one volume here. It's a graphical recommitment. This is like what is this about? Oh, because this is a real creepy thing from Mardi Gras. I hated this image because they talk about bizarre masks. I said, okay, I'm going to fix them. So they've been screwing around with these gangsters, and these guys got weird heads. And it's like you're going to have to eventually pay the piper, right? So this is the Hands of Fate, and they just screw with the wrong person.
It's coming out of them.
Yeah, that's one of the people that they just were partying and destroyed it, and they think they can get away with it, but don't screw with these people, And see, you have the Matisse's dance, and there was under fencing, I guess, or whatever, so it's touche,
What is this from?
Yeah.
Oh, this is fingerprints. I call this turbulent identity. So this is wind turbulence on the wing, and then the fingerprints from FBI on the pages, and then it's remapped into this other thing, But you don't know what you're going to get. You just sit there and let your mind open up and start working, and then the pieces become what they become.
And when did you start on this project?
I started it, I just did a few in like 2007, 2006, but 2006, but I stopped, and then I finally completed, I completed, it took about a year, just focused on this.
The last year you focused on this.
Yeah, well, I was doing all the other projects,
Was
fundraising.
it all in Nashville? You did it all in...
Back in the studio, but
yeah.
some in Victoria because I was prepared. I wanted to test it. I
You had
tested
like indentured, like grad students or something
no,
working? Or?
it's local people. We pay people, the way I hire people, I said, Miss Glick, she became chief gluer. So she comes in, her husband, I'm paying her husband to do some other work for me, woodworking, and I said, so Miss Glick, I talked to you, have you ever know anything about art? No. Have you made art? No. And then we start talking, I said, and so have you ever messed with stamps? She said, I had a stamp collection. I said, you're hired. Because if you know paper and glue, that's what I need.
What kind of glue is it? What kind of glue is it?
We use Yes Paste, which is archival paste, and it's all have to be hand painted after it's cut. It's very
Yeah,
delicate.
so
when you-
because nothing goes.
And I kind of invent methods, like, this is not easy to do with paper because it will be destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So by wetting and forming it, and then carefully painting it, and
Wow. Wow.
so each one.
She's good. Miss Glick is good.
Glick is good, and we also had Miss Byers, who's about my age, who is really OCD, and she loves to cut. Not herself, but you know, yeah.
She's
so
not that kind of cutter.
she's not that, but she was our chief cutter, and she took pride in her cutting. So we isolated
Wow.
the people, and they would come in and cut all, you cut all day, and then I would cut with them.
And what did they think about what they were doing?
They, I don't know. Sometimes they didn't ask them. They really enjoyed the process.
Like, would they, like, would you know to isolate that? I mean, to cut that out?
No,
Or did it have a background to it?
Sometimes I would see a background. I said, so we
Cut
have
that
to.
out.
We need to cut that out. But see, this is like which came first? Is the question the wheel, the light bulb, or diapers? That's baby Jesus being wrapped. So
Right.
that's a question. But you don't know. I just don't.
No, that was obvious.
Yeah, obvious. Yeah. And this is like so everything has its own narrative, which is fun to do.
Yates with butterflies.
That's right. Yeah, taking a bite. Yeah.
Who's the lady?
She's okay. Let me try.
Was she a writer?
She was a courtesan. Yeah, she was a writer as well. So they're kind of chewing on their words, just in a flowery way. That's I told you I messed with Yates somewhere.
Yeah.
And so each one, some are diptychs. This is like a police lineup. So the kid is knocked out and she's dead. She's lying down. This is the witness, and you have everybody. And Jesus is there too. So so these are so the lineup.
Why is Jesus under deafness and education? Why is
Yeah.
he there?
And this is like
How did he end up in
Huh?
that?
Where-
How did Jesus end up in deafness and education?
I don't know.
Christ, no.
No,
Jesus,
it's not.
no,
There
no,
was- It was an image of
Crucifix, no.
no.
Death.
It's under this somewhere.
Yeah, somehow Jesus ended up in the...
Yeah. That's Mr. Dostoevsky. The Russian.
Tolstoy?
Yeah, no,
Dostoevsky?
Yes. And that's the demon pulling his demons, right? Pulling on his mind. So each one, like I say, they're enjoyable. They're always enjoyable to finish. They're very difficult to make, because you're given this parameters. It took a long time. Sometimes I could do 10 in a day, and sometimes it took 2-3 weeks to do 10. It depends on the images, and then I go back and read about the context. So I go back to encyclopedia and see and use it to stimulate the work. Sometimes it was a vehicle to just go totally away from it, and just get the hell away from it, and just be, don't be so compressed in my thinking, to open it up. It's a way of freeing the head to be given limitations and parameters, and I go with it,
What was the process of revision like?
Oh, revision. Oh gosh, when I found somebody, we did have to buy new encyclopedias. But well, not new ones, but same. I had to go wait and get them on eBay, whatever. But I put it away and make sure that there was no replication. You cannot. There's rules again. Same rules apply.
Because if you messed up some image, you had to go get another one to replace it or something.
Yeah, and
If Mr. Glick didn't do well or something.
well, sometimes what happened was that there was another team doing the original sort, so they got put away. They're the high authorized, but they're not in this collection. They're great, but they just cannot
There's a
be.
whole other series.
No, there's a whole nother grouping, but they are not allowed to be part of the volumes
Wow.
because it has to have integrity. Unless I allowed it or whatever. But there was one that was sometimes, and they improve sometimes. Like this clowns never fight fair. They never fight by the book, right? They're clowns. And he's referring, the guy at the box, he doesn't know, but the guy's coming from behind going to bat him, but clowns are notorious. You never trust a clown, right?
No.
So, but the earlier one was less defined, and this becomes refined. This is like art handling with while smoking and drinking. You've got a beer, and you're smoking, and they're operating on a Rembrandt. So. This is Helen, you know Helen, right?
Hey.
Hi.
I didn't know you were so close.
I just walked in.
Would you let them sit for a while? Like after you arrange them, would you let it?
Oh,
sit?
yeah, yeah.
Go
Yeah, they don't,
for a day or
sometimes,
two, and then go back and.
sometimes it's immediate, and then sometimes they take days to construct, and they change.
Yeah.
Sometimes I did have to just break them and say, this is better. So there is no set formula, because to try to not have a formula was the idea. Yeah, so every volume you have a tabula rasa, you come in because you don't know what's going on. What was necessary to create a format? Okay, I need these 17 by 20, which is pretty big for all these small images, but I said I'm gonna challenge it, and then to use the space accordingly. So yeah, it was a trip.
There are moments where something in this one is begging for something in that one.
Yeah.
Speaking to each other.
Yeah.
You really struggle with, should I leave it? Is it more valuable here?
Sometimes that happened. It did happen, and then you have to unglue it. You have to soak it in water, and hope you don't tear it apart.
Oh, geez. So you really did revise. Like I just meant like letting it sit for a while, but you actually like,
If they were glued in advance, yeah, but normally they sat and unglued until I said, okay, it's time to commit to glue.
Right.
Because that gives you that time. It's hard to remember. It's been over. Because every circumstance was always different, and then there's the interleaving, and that was necessary, and part that had to happen. Like I think this was one that was put away. This, because it was from another volume, and then I found it was this. I said, well, you have to take the whole one. But this got salvaged because it was appropriate, and it becomes this. This is the trajectory of an encounter, I think, all it is, because of all the hardware. You don't know it's gonna, and you'll have this one lizard, so what am I gonna do with all this hardware, images. So that's why robotics. This is called "Stab the Sun and Bad Things Will Happen." And here is like the snake in the grass. So I took the grass, I cut it carefully and preserved every part. So the shadow of one, the after image of one is in another of the partridge. So there are formal relationships. Sometimes they're psychological juxtapositions. Sometimes they're surreal, and sometimes they're composited. And then there's narratives. So there's always, you never knew. You never knew. Well, now I know. I don't have to do another collage for a while. This is my first time, and it's not going to happen.
You got it out of your system?
I think so. We're going to strike the collage room. We had a whole room set aside. Had to buy air conditioning, and then it got to winter, I had to get the heat, and we just kept working. And every day it's like, sometimes the crew would be frustrated. They said, you can't make it. So we had this all-nighter session, and they were coming out like water, like kaboom, go kaboom, another one. Yeah. You have to get the crew upside. I think I'm a genius.
When did you get the titles? Did you do titles right then when you did them?
Yeah, sometimes it'd be sometimes I just write them on scraps of paper immediately. I said, that's the title. That's it.
Did you ever go back later? And
Yeah,
find the
of
title
course.
also?
I said, what was I thinking? I must have been tired. That title is like 80 words long. I mean, you need some economy. Some are very long titles, and some are like, no, it's making up words. It's fun. To me, the titles are very important because, again, it's the encyclopedia and the narrative.
How about the last one you made?
The last one, oh yeah, I showed them the mace of authority. Yeah, it was fun to make the poems, the word poems. Yeah, so anyway, it's been a hell of a note, Yeah, now that's the nest of architecture. It's images of architecture. There's so many images of architecture. So it's sliced into ribbons and then laid like a nest, glued into a nest. So, And that United Nations, we had a hole punch and poked up all their heads. And
See, now I got to come in here and write poems about every one of these. All this is still you're learning more now.
I was in here for an hour, but I just looked. He was talking.
Was it full? Was it like?
Oh yeah. It was nice. They had Occupy Wall Street